Thank you to Tanu and the teams at Speaking Tiger and Bangalore International Center for this invitation to witness a conversation about a Sufi and his muse. For me, it's extra special because I get to listen to a murshid of mine talk about a novel that concerns a murshid and murid. The novel is the Sufi's Nightingale, and the author is Mr. Sarbpreet Singh, who is also the author of The Camel Merchant of Philadelphia and The Night of the Restless Spirit, Stories of 1984. I have had the privilege of knowing him since 2021, when I read his book, The Story of Sikhs from 1469 to 1708, which was based on his podcast. I've had wonderful conversations with him about Sikhism, identity, faith, my childhood, and more. I'm happy to be a part of anything that involves hanging around him, because I believe if a little bit of his energy rubs on me, I'll be able to do something towards my identity, even if it's a fraction of what he has done for his roots. His latest book, The Sufi's Nightingale, is a special tale of a 16th-century Sufi poet in Lahore called Hazrat Shah Hussain, who is also known as Lal Hussain. The introduction has already been given, so I would not go into that. But what I want to say is that the two men together who make Lal Hussain and the beautiful kafis that emerge out of this love are one of the things that make me very drawn into this particular conversation. The story, as fictionalized by Mr. Singh, weaves these kafis in English translations with the blooming of love between the beloveds. Here is one. The road that my beloved takes, a sacrifice to it I will be. The road that my beloved takes, a sacrifice to it I will be. I'll fling the weaving basket, I'll spin no more, I'll be free. From this here's heart, a spark will fly. From this here's heart, a spark will fly, and my Ranjha will come to me. Hussain, the lowly dervish, says, my Lord will bring my love, you'll see. Well, let's open ourselves to this conversation as it brings more such insights into love. Mr. Singh's interlocutor is Mr. Chiranjiv Singh here. I'm honored to have the opportunity to welcome him, a gentleman I wish I had known much earlier, but I hope it's never too late to be in good company. Chiranjiv Singh is former ambassador of India to UNESCO in Paris, an IAS officer of the 1969 batch. He retired in 2005 as the Development Commissioner of Karnataka and Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Karnataka. After his retirement, he has been associated with numerous non-governmental organizations working in the field of rural development, environment, and culture. He was awarded the Rajyotsava Award by the Government of Karnataka for his achievements in 2005. He was also conferred knighthood, or the honor of Officer of the National Order of Merit, by the President of France for promoting Indo-French culture. His book, Yava Janmada Maitri, or Is This a Relationship from Another Life, was published by Navakarnataka Publications in 2021. Apart from Kannada, Mr. Singh knows quite a few languages: Gurmukhi, French, Urdu, German, Gujarati, Bangla, Marathi, Hindi, and English, of course. That familiarity with different languages and contexts make you an appropriate discussant today in Bangalore as we talk about 16th century Lahore, about a Punjabi poet being fictionalized in English. I have come to admire the immense interest you take in conversations about identity and belongingness. I could have never thought of a better discussant for this conversation. With Mr. Sarbpreet Singh's roots in Sikkim and yours here in Karnataka, I believe we are all in for a wonderful exchange on the nature of calling something or someone one's own. Over to you.
Thank you for a very generous introduction. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Yeah, I guess. Shah Hussain is one of our greatest poets. I would not say greatest Punjabi, one of the greatest Punjabi poets. I would say one of the greatest poets, irrespective of the language. And he was a great mystic and a great poet. And his kafis, the form which he wrote in, and probably it originated with him, but or popularized by him, kafi. They are part of the fabric of Punjabi culture on both sides of the border. Since most of you would not have read the book, I would just read a few lines from the book, and that would set the tone. And then I would leave it to Sarbpreet Singh Ji to speak. You see, as you have just been told, Shah Hussain saw a Brahmin boy, Madho Lal, and instantly fell in love with him. And this was a love which transcends all labels, all distinctions. And so much so that his name became Madho Lal Hussain. And Madho Lal also remained with him throughout. Many miracles are associated with Shah Hussain. His fame had spread even to the Delhi court. He was most of his time was during Akbar's period, but after Akbar, Jahangir had also come on the throne, and Jahangir had heard about him. So he asked some people in Lahore to record whatever Shah Hussain was saying. I don't know if that record is available or not.
Really, it's not. It's lost.
It's lost, but those stories became part of the common knowledge. So many of those have been collected by Singh Saab, and it's a unique relationship between Shah Hussain and Madho Lal. And this passage comes right in the beginning of the book. I beheld the expression on my Murshid's face. He was looking at Madho tenderly, like a mother might look at her child. No, not like a mother, I decided. More like a young girl who has just experienced the pangs of love for the first time. Further, Sheikh Behlol, another Sufi who was his mentor in a way, Sheikh Behlol, this is Shah Hussain saying, Sheikh Behlol had once told me that all men of God are connected to one another, no matter what faiths they profess. Now here, Madho Lal is a Brahmin boy, and Hussain, Lal Hussain, is a Muslim Sufi, unconventional, about his faith, malamati. Sarbpreet Singh will tell you about, because Malamatis are, to my mind, somewhat like the Aghoris. They believe that Malamat is taking the blame, that if you are blamed through your actions, then that's the way to rise above the common temptations, etc., and reach a spiritual state of, a heightened spiritual state. So he was a Malamti. And Aghoris, I suppose the Aghori philosophy is also similar, that you break all the taboos and then you reach a state where nothing can tempt you. So his behavior and that of his followers caused scandal to begin with, till the miracles associated with him. For example, Madho Lal, it's recorded. I mean, it's a common knowledge, and this is an incident which is mentioned there because it's an important miracle associated with Shah Hussain. Madho Lal was bitten by a snake, And he was given up for dead when Shah Hussain saw Madhullah lying down almost dead or dead. He said, "Madho, get up. Why are you sleeping?" And he got up. And it was this miracle and another miracle about which Singh Sahib will tell you. I mean, these are mentioned in the book. So his fame spread. And that's how people started looking at him with awe, if I should say. Now, this is the kind of relationship which is unique. We have, for example, Ras Khan. Ras Khan, he has mentioned in the book about Ras Khan. Ras Khan fell in love with the image of Lord Krishna. We have two eminent writers of Hindi here, and they would know about Ras Khan. And we have other examples of this kind of attachment, but this is unique in the sense that this is between Madhulal and Shah Hussain, and this relationship is unique because they became one. So, Singh Sahib, would you say that the lesson from their life is that nothing else matters except love, and it is love that takes you to spiritual heights? And in any case, in Sufism, you have the idea of ishq-e hakiki and ishq-e majazi, that the worldly love being a path to the divine love. And this is exactly what is mentioned in the book. The book is interestingly structured, about which I suppose we'll have discussion, but I think I have spoken enough, and now it's for Singh Sahib to speak about the book.
It is on. Thank you for those wonderful introductory remarks. And Soni, thank you for the very generous introduction, probably more generous than deserved. But yes, indeed, fundamentally, the book is about love and the transcendence of love. I'll actually start on a bit of a tangent and talk about my journey into Shah Hussein's poetry. I grew up as far from Punjab and Punjabi culture as one possibly can on the Indian subcontinent. I was raised in Sikkim. I lived in Gangtok during my high school years. We spoke Punjabi at home, but I didn't read Gurmukhi. Somewhat ironically, I started embracing Punjabi culture, in my mid-20s after I left India. Which is perhaps in hindsight not very common, because all exiles at some point in time start casting about for their roots. In my case, I was a little fortunate because that quest started when I was quite young. But that didn't bring me to Shah Hussain. That took me somewhere else. So that quest actually motivated me to engage with my Sikh roots, so to speak. And I did that for quite some time with a lot of depth. Learning about Sikh history, of course, and then also engaging with the music, because those of you who have even a passing knowledge of the Sikh way of life know that music is fundamental to ibadat, in the Sikh faith, and it's a tradition that comes directly from the founder of the Sikh faith, Guru Nanak Sahib, and continues unbroken for 500 plus years. So I had immersed myself into Gurbani for a long time. I struggled and became a practitioner of sorts. I started mentoring young people, became an important part of my life. So we fast forward several years, and I'm at a point in my life where I'm somewhat melancholy, and I do derive a lot of comfort from the singing of Gurbani. And then quite serendipitously, I find the poetry of Shah Hussain. And it speaks to me. My Punjabi is not very good, I'll confess. So sometimes the words are difficult. I have to look them up. I have to really try and understand the poetry. But it flows beautifully. And the one thing that comes through in coffee after coffee is the exquisite manner in which the pain of separation is expressed. So that's what drew me into Shah Hussein's poetry. So as I said, I had been immersed in Gurbani Sangeet for quite some time. I developed a parallel interest in North Indian classical music, which I pursued mostly as a listener. But that's when I encountered the kafis of Shah Hussain, and quite by accident, I thought this poetry was meant to be sung. So kafis are written to be sung. And in fact, if you pay attention, you'll find that some of the storied singers of Sufi music, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab, Abda Parveen ji, have sung a few kafis of Shah Hussain as well. So I started dabbling and creating my own little compositions for singing Shah Hussein's kafis. And before I even thought of writing a word, I sang Shah Hussain for more than a couple of years and really, really got into the poetry. So that aroused, especially as I engaged with the kafis and, the very popular Punjabi legend of Heer and Ranja features prominently in Shah Hussein's kafis, where, like in a lot of other devotional poetry from the Indian subcontinent, Shah Hussain writes in the feminine voice, where the feminine voice represents the devotee and addresses herself to the masculine, which refers to the divine, whatever form or shape the divine might be. So Shah Hussain writes in similar vein often, and oftentimes, as he writes his poetry, he turns into Heer, and the object of his attention, who we don't know who the object quite is, and we'll unpack that a little later, becomes Ranja. And those of you who have even a passing knowledge of the story of Heer and Ranja, the oppressors in the story are the Khedas, Heer's in-laws. So the Khedas become, the Khedas represent an oppressive society. So that's how a lot of his kafis are structured. So it engendered a tremendous amount of curiosity about this man, and I started researching him and reading about him. And then I discovered that I had actually encountered him a few years earlier without quite knowing it. I was researching one of my previous books, The Camel Merchant of Philadelphia, which is set in the court of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. And I remember that several European visitors to the king's court, and indeed his own official diarist, Sohanlal Suri, mentioned that on Basant Panchami, the first day of spring, the emperor would make his way to the outskirts of Lahore to pay his respects at the shrine of one Madho Lal Hussain. So I remember being very intrigued by the name. Madho I get, maybe Madho Lal too, Hussain, yes, but Madho Lal Hussain, what kind of a name is that? Was he a Hindu? Was he a Muslim? And then, of course, I learned that it was two individuals, Madho and Lal Hussain. Lal Hussain was so known because he had embraced red robes, which was quite the scandal in Lahore at that time, because holy men weren't supposed to wear red robes. White was a more dignified color. So Lal Hussain, the one in red robes. Even so, when I quote unquote discovered or engaged with the poetry of Shah Hussain, I didn't make the connection. And then when I started reading, I discovered, this is the same Madho Lal Hussain that I found a few years ago. So I write both fiction and nonfiction. So my original impulse was, let me write a biography of Shah Hussain. Such a fabulous poet, really not well known, There is a fabulous biography of Shah Hussain written by Dr. Mohan Singh Diwana, but it's in Punjabi, it's out of print, and I felt that modern readers would probably not engage with it, so I thought, let me write a biography. So I start doing my research, and much to my dismay, I find that the amount of biographical information about Shah Hussain is really thin. So all the sources I find talk about a few things. You know, he was a weaver by caste. He was an Islamic scholar in his early years, and then he had his epiphany, and he completely changed his life. And of course, there's talk of Madho. And depending on who you read, Madho is depicted very differently in some of these historical accounts. So realizing that there just wasn't enough meat to write a decent biography, I figured, why not imagine Shah Hussein's life? Why not take what I've been able to discover about him, use it as a skeleton, if you will, and then fill in the rest with my imagination, looking at who else was around in Lahore at that time, who might Shah Hussain have interacted with, what might the nature of those interactions have been like. That's what sent me on this quest, which brings us to this book today. And throughout my journey, the one thing that was always a point of focus was this relationship between Shah Hussain and Madho, how it was interpreted and how it has been interpreted by modern scholars as well. But then, every time you one scratched one's head wondering what the precise nature of the relationship might have been, I would just go back to the Kafis and read them again. And that is the true essence of the love between Shah Hussain and the object of his affection. So to answer this very simple question, yes, this book is about many things, but more than anything else, it's about the transcendence of love and the triumph of love. And this is not just Shah Hussain and Madho. There's a third character in the book who actually happens to be my favorite character. So the journey of that character and the transformation of their love, which doesn't look like love in the beginning of the novel, is another important aspect that was very much my focus as I was writing this.
Just to read a few more lines. It had been a cold, rainy day in Lahore, and when I reached the Dargah of Shah Hussain in the evening, it was quite deserted. I sat down in a corner of the covered veranda outside the Dargah. I turned on my Tambura app and started to sing with my eyes closed. As I was singing, I felt something settle on my shoulders. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the custodians of the Dargah had placed a ceremonial chadar of the kind that is offered at Sufi shrines over my shoulders. They also bequeathed upon me a small worn towel that they used to clean the Bazaar with. I felt that the permission I had gone to seek had been granted. To me, I think this was the most moving part of the novel, though this is not fiction. But what was your experience while you were writing the book?
So I'll talk about that briefly. That's from the author's note at the back of the book. You don't often find these in novels because a novel stands alone, but this was such an important sort of part of my journey that I decided to include it. And then there's another reason why the author's note appears, which we'll talk about. So it was early 2020. I had been immersed in Shah Hussain for, I would say, about a good 3 years or so by then. And I found myself in Lahore to talk about the Camel Merchant of Philadelphia at a conference. So you have to humor a small digression. You may or may not have heard about the experience of people from India who visit Pakistan. I'd heard about it a lot. And I was told that when you get to Pakistan, the kind of warmth that you experience is impossible to articulate. So I was kind of prepared when I went there. But it was so intense that it was still a surprise. So I'm a storyteller, so humor me. So in my previous life, I was in technology for several years. That's what I did for most of my life. And I traveled a lot. There were times in my life when I did business in the Far East. There were times when I did business in Europe. I went everywhere. The one constant in all of my travels was the stern demeanor of immigration officials. I have a suspicion that, the muscles in your face that are used to smile, you have to get them surgically removed when you become an immigration official. I'm not even joking. So I crossed the Atari border. It's early in the morning. I didn't fly. I walked across the border. And I'm probably one of the first people to cross. And, an immigration official is sitting on the other side behind a desk. He doesn't notice me at first. He's busy doing something. And I expect, the usual stern or surly immigration official. He looks up at me. A wide smile breaks out across his face. He jumps out of his seat, bounds out of his chair, thrusts his hand forward and says, "Singh Saab, welcome to Pakistan." The rest of the experience was exactly the same. I had just written a book about the Lahore court. So obviously, within 15 minutes of arriving in Lahore, the first thing that I did was I asked my local friends to take me to Lahore Fort. So I go to Lahore Fort, and I'm a nobody. I've written a book, but nobody knows my book. It's not available in Pakistan. Within 10 minutes, I'm mobbed like I'm some sort of celebrity. Old people, young people, boys, girls, they all come up to me. They speak in Punjabi. "Uncle ji, tusi kitthon aaye ho? Where are you from? What are you doing here?" So much warmth. So that experience was a constant. And oh, by the way, if you'll humor another small digression, I met several Pakistanis who have been to India. And they told me that their experience in India was exactly the same as my experience in Pakistan. Which tells me that if the common people of India and Pakistan met a little more, things would be very, very different between our countries. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I'll get back to the story. So I have this wonderful experience in Lahore. I managed to sneak off and visit Nankana Sahib, the birthplace of Guru Nanak Sahib. Beautiful, beautiful experience. Again, all the devotees there, no Sikhs, all Muslims. I get the opportunity to sing there, and they stand there, and like Muslims offer dua. That's the position that they stand in, listening to Gurbani. Fabulous experience. Then I go to the Dargah of Baba Bulle Shah in Kasur. Beautiful experience again. It's teeming. By the way, I had learned that the Sufi khankas did langar before the gurdwaras did langar. So langar was going on, people were eating, they were singing. Fabulous, fabulous experience. So now it's my last day in Lahore, and we get to this excerpt finally. So I meet this academic, Dr. Kalyan Singh, who's probably the only Sikh professor in Pakistan. So he learns about my interest in Shah Hussain, and he says, "I'm going to take you to visit one of the foremost Shah Hussain scholars in Pakistan." I said, "Sure, absolutely." So we go to this institute called the Punjab Institute of Language and Culture, and I meet this gentleman. His name is Khaqan Haider Ghazi Saab. Very kind, we engage. He gives me one of his books. He really encourages me to write about Shah Hussain. And then he's the one who says, when I tell him that this is my last day, but I do plan to go to the Dargah of Shah Hussain, he says, "Definitely go, but go there with the intention of asking for permission to write about it. So that's what the excerpt is about. So I went there, and it was desolate. It had been a rainy day. There was nobody there. Very different from my experience at Qasur. But then, at the end, you heard the excerpt already. I felt that permission had indeed been granted, and then I went back to the U.S. and I would dare say that in the next 3 or 4 months, the book pretty much wrote itself. I mean, I'm only being half tongue in cheek. It was easy to write. Just the emotion of having been there, visited the Dargah was so powerful. And of course, the deep, deep love that I had developed for the poetry of Shah Hussain.
What you said reminds me of the fact that probably there is only one kind of story in the world. It's either a love story or a devotional story. And it's amazing the way in which both of these stories keep on converging. Whenever we talk about a devotee, all the mystic poets, saint poets, bhakti poets that we have had here, whom we know in a better detail, we keep on saying love is God, God is beloved, and both of these things keep converging. So I wanted to have your thoughts about this as a form in itself. Is every love story essentially the same? Because we are also talking about love and faith today.
That's a deep question, and in a sense, yes, absolutely. But I think that your experience matters as well. What you've experienced in your life matters. How you approach these stories, how you live these stories is profoundly, profoundly influenced by who you are, where you've been, and what you've been up to. I can tell you for a fact that if I had encountered Shah Hussain 25 years earlier, I don't know how I would have reacted. So yes, there's a lot of commonality that binds these stories together, but I do believe that our individual experiences are also tremendously important, and they, in great part, influence how we approach these stories and how we engage with them.
And what role do you think would research or history play into it? I was reading one of the blurbs which says this is a fantastic piece of historical fiction. And in the post-colonial literature that we read, we think of history in terms of the British era history and that kind of history, but this really takes us far back into time, as if history were not just what post-colonial literature has identified as history. It's way beyond that. So where does history and research fall there?
So this is a topic that's very dear to my heart, and we might be here a long time. So all joking aside, this is very important. It is tremendously important. When we write history, who we read and what our perspective is fundamentally important. This is a work of fiction, ultimately, but it is deeply researched. I have tried my best to research it. To answer your question better, I'll actually go back to my previous book, The Story of the Sikhs. So this is part of a series. The first one has been published. The next one is going to be published hopefully sometime next year. So this particular book covers the period of the Sikh gurus. So from 1469, when Guru Nanak Sahib was born, to 1708, when Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the last guru of the Sikhs, passed away. So when that book came out, I was asked this question a few times. There have been a few histories of the Sikhs written already. Why did you think it was necessary for you to write a new one? And the answer to that is exactly, the question that you asked. That particular work is heavily, heavily informed by our own sources. So I don't ignore, Western scholarship or modern scholarship by any means. But the gold, as far as I'm concerned, are our traditional texts. So when writing about the life of Guru Nanak Sahib, there's a tradition in the Sikh world known as the Janam Sakhi tradition, which literally translates to birth stories. So there are a number of different Janam Sakhis, and scholars have been arguing about dating them and authenticating them for a long time. But some of them are generally considered to be more accurate than others, and so on. And then there are the writings of a Sikh scholar who lived at the time of Guru Arjan Sahib, the fifth Guru, Bhai Gurdas. So these are some of the richest sources of writing about the life of Guru Nanak. So I draw upon those heavily. So it's a curious thing in the Sikh world, and actually outside the Sikh world as well. There's a fair amount of awareness about the first Guru, Guru Nanak. There's a decent amount of awareness about the last Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, a little bit of awareness about the fifth Guru, and the rest of the Gurus are more or less a mystery to the world. And this is not just to non-Sikhs, this is in the Sikh world as well, for whatever reason. So while approaching some of the lives of some of the other Gurus in the stories, I really focused on a body of literature which is largely lost to the modern world. So there are these magnificent writings, poetic writings, mostly in Braj Bhasha, that tell the story of a lot of the Sikh Gurus with great richness and great imagination. For instance, there's a text called the Gurbilas Patshahi Chemi about the sixth Guru. The author is actually unknown. Nobody's been able to pin down exactly who wrote the book, but it's magnificent poetry. It's a kind of writing that you don't see referred to anywhere. And then later on, you encounter other texts in Braj Bhasha, some of which were written in the time of Guru Gobind Singh Ji in his court. So trying to access a lot of these sources while writing history, or by extension, historical fiction, is tremendously, tremendously important to me. The second book in this series, which is coming out hopefully next year, addresses the very tumultuous period between 1708 and 1780. So it was the death of Guru Gobind Singh Ji and the birth of the young Ranjit Singh. It was a time of tremendous turmoil when the Mughal Empire was collapsing. The Afghan Empire of Ahmad Shah Abdali had been established, and northern India had been subjected to raid after raid by Ahmad Shah Abdali, a time of great ferment when the Sikhs rose and established their power and really created the environment for the creation of the Sikh Empire. So a lot of writing has been done about this period by Indian historians, by Western historians, a lot of whom have translated Persian sources. The one source that has not been used a lot is, again, an epic work of Braj Bhasha poetry by a Sikh writer named Ratan Singh Bhangu. This is a fabulous piece of epic writing that describes the personalities, describes the battles. So I have drawn very, very heavily on that while writing this book. So to answer your original question, this is just a personal thing. I think it's really, really important to go to our sources. And oftentimes there are people who will say, oh, this is not history, this is hagiography. Well, I'm not a historian, I'm a storyteller. So I'm very, very happy to take those liberties and really try and bring the richness of these sources, to the reader.
And you have told a great story. And coming back to the book, you say, the character says, it is obvious that the world of the hereafter is better. Who can dispute that? But were the joys of this life not created by Allah as well? Why do you condemn them so? I cut him off, that is the questioner, what use is all this knowledge and scholarship if our lives are joyless? Aren't children better off than us? They play without restraint, while scholars like us feed our nafs ego by accumulating knowledge that we think makes us better than everyone else. Would you say that this is the key to the character of Shah Hussain and Madhulal's?
So what you just read is sort of, my retelling of Shah Hussain's epiphany, which appears in a lot of the lore that surrounds Shah Hussain. So to give you, tell you a little bit about Shah Hussain. So Shah Hussain comes from a quote unquote low caste family. Ironically, they're Muslim, but the baggage of caste persists, as it does in every faith in the Indian subcontinent, unfortunately, as we see up to this day. When he's very young, he becomes a hafiz, which is he memorizes the Quran. And the lore again suggests that that is through the blessing of a master who appears mysteriously to Shah Hussain. Now, he is a weaver by caste, but he's not a weaver by profession, though a lot of his kafis, not in this book, but a lot of his other kafis do use tropes from weaving constantly. Shah Hussain decides to become a scholar. So he enters one of the most respected seminaries in Lahore and studies under the very stern Maulana Sayyidullah, who is very respected among the ulama of Lahore. And he spends 20 plus years learning to become an Islamic scholar. And he is destined for greatness because he's brilliant, he's immersed in his studies. And then he has this epiphany that you just heard, rendered. And the epiphany essentially is, his master is explaining a particular verse from the Quran, and Shah Hussain interprets it as, what's the point of living a joyless life? Everything in the world has been created by God, so might as well go out there and embrace the world. And that's the moment, it is said, that he gives up his Islamic studies, puts on red robes, shaves off his beard, which is, sacrilege as well, and is seen singing and dancing wantonly in the streets of Lahore. And there are rumors that he drinks as well. Nobody knows what's going on. What's actually going on is Shah Hussain has embraced the path of the malamati. So the path of the malamati is essentially, you shall court the contempt of the world because that's the only way in which you can keep your ego in check. So the epiphany sends Shah Hussain on the path, and the path that he takes is one that seemingly embraces song, dance, joy. But what's really going on is he is locked in a struggle with his ego, which appears in the book at multiple unexpected times.
I think the kafi that I read at the beginning also had this. It says, "I'll fling the weaving basket, I'll spin no more, I'll be free." So when you were
This is one of the few weaving kafis
Yes.
that made its way into the book.
Yes.
Given the theme, I sort of naturally gravitated to some of the other kafis that talked more about love and longing. And I was a sucker for Heer and Ranja.
Yeah.
Anytime Heer and Ranja appeared, I had to sing those.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, but since we are on the subject of kafis, could we have a kafi from you?
Yes, absolutely. I'll be happy.
You cover a very wide spectrum here, For example, I mentioned Madhulal meeting Ras Khan. After Shah Hussein's death, he joins the Mughal army and goes all over. And he is told about Vrindavan. And he goes to Vrindavan and there meets Ras Khan. He meets Guru Arjan Dev. Of course, your description of the meeting is quite moving, but actually, though Guru Arjan Dev and Shah Hussain remained friends, but Shah Hussain had offered his kafis for inclusion in the Guru Granth Sahib, and Guru Sahib said, no, my friend, you keep them as they are. I mean, they were not included in the Guru Granth Sahib. Great poetry, but and their friendship remained. Now, you have from Ras Khan to Guru Arjan Dev, the entire spectrum of that era is taken. I particularly liked that you did not shy away from mentioning the miracles associated with Shah Hussain, because normal now our you can say tendency is to eschew description of miracles and sort of explain them in secular terms. But miracles are miracles. I mean, why shy away from them? So this was a good thing that you have mentioned all these miracles associated with Shah Hussain. Of course, in the Punjabi books, there are some which you haven't mentioned here, which are quite naughty, in fact. Those naughty ones. So even I would not like to translate them and repeat them here. But I mean, they are there. So the lighter side of Shah Hussain has not come in this book as much as could have come.
Perhaps. So just to unpack a couple of things there. So there is a tradition, in the Sikh world that Shah Hussain took his kafis to Guru Arjan Sahib when he was compiling the Guru Granth Sahib. I actually was very interested in learning about that, and I tried to do a lot of research, but I was not able to find any solid historical reference to substantiate that. So I won't tell you what happens in the book, no spoilers. But I'll offer my own personal opinion. So the notion of taking his writings to Guru Arjan Sahib for inclusion in an exalted book that was being prepared, this is just me speculating, so not on the basis of any historical fact, didn't really sit very well with me and my sort of understanding of the malamati practice of Shah Hussain. I mean, this is a man who sought the contempt of the world every day. What would that have done to his nafs if he had gone to Guru Arjan Sahib saying, I've written some great poetry as well, why don't you put it in the exalted book? So this was a piece of popular tradition that I actually had a little bit of difficulty with. So that's why I imagined the meeting as I imagined the meeting. But I'll tell you one little thing. In none of Shah Hussein's kafis, except one, the word Satgur appears. So, he addresses the divine in many different ways. But there is one particular kafi in which Satgur ke bal jai, the line appears. And no historical facts to sort of confirm this either. But in some of the lore I encountered, it was said that that particular kafi, which the start of the line is Sajna bolan di jaye nahi, and the last line is I'll have to look it up. I don't remember off the top of my head. Satgur ke bal jahi is where he's expressing respect for Guru Arjan Sahib. True, not true, I don't know. That's what the lore says. And coming back to some of the fabulism in the book and, the miracles and so on and so forth, this is something which I, as a reader, enjoy tremendously. And I'll sort of, pay homage to some of my great influences when it comes to fiction in particular. These are writers that I read when I was in my late teens or early 20s. And now, as a graybeard, I still consider these books to be among the best that I've ever read. So, Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children is one of them. Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, Gunter Grass's Tin Drum. So the theme, you can tell from that magic realism is something that's very, very close to my heart. And because my subject gave me the opportunity to play with that, I did so with a lot of gratitude and joy, I would say.
What is the time this thing? How much?
We need to understand what the main timekeeper is not here, but yes, we are at 7, and maybe we could after we have a coffee from you, we could open up to the audience and see if they have any questions. But
also, another interesting thing in the book, you see, you have brought in Sai Mia Mir at a couple of places. Now, Sai Mia Mir was also a great Sufi, and people here do not know that when the Hari Mandir, that is the Golden Temple, was being constructed, Guru Arjan Dev invited Sai Mia Mir to lay the foundation stone. The foundation stone of Hari Mandir is laid by Sai Mia Mir, who figures in the book. So this actually really, as I said, covers a vast ground. On the one hand, you have the entire Sufi culture, you have the malamatis, you have malamatis, I would say, are like aghoris of the Sufi world. Like we have aghoris in the Tantra philosophy, you have malamatis in the Sufi world, and you have Ras Khan as a Vaishnav saint. So the whole spectrum of culture that is brought in, especially for people in the South, which, this will be totally new because they are not familiar with all that entire culture. So to that extent, I think for the South Indian readers, this book would be quite an interesting book and enlightening also.
So I will offer a couple of coffees for the audience, just a line or two, and maybe two very different ones. And actually, before I sing a line or two from the second one, I'll read a few lines from the book. We haven't talked about my favorite character that much so far, Maqbool, who is completely a work of fiction, and Maqbool sometimes speaks in my personal voice. He's a musician, and I'm not a great musician, but I'm a very enthusiastic one. So some of the things that Maqbool says about music are things that I've experienced in my own life. But Maqbool is it's mostly through Maqbool's eyes that we see Madho, who historically is also a very shadowy figure. I mean, as much as there's a lack of information about Shah Hussain, there's an even greater lack of information about Madho. So in that sense, Maqbool is sort of, he gives the reader a peek into Madho. So the first kafi that I'll sing is the one that I actually sang at the Dargah of Shah Hussain, and this is So this is the first one actually that I had created a composition for as well. And this is sort of the theme of this particular coffee is, again, the exquisite pain, the exquisite expression of the pain of separation. I'm just getting ready, sorry. I just need to get the lyrics for just a second. And I'll explain the words briefly. दर्द विछोड़े दा हाल दर्द विछोड़े दा हाल मायनी मैं कैनू आखां दर्द विछोड़े दा हाल मायनी मैं कैनू आखां मायनी मैं कैनू आखां मायनी मैं कैनू आखां मायनी मैं कैनू आखां. So Shah Hussain is addressing his long gone mother, and he says, "Oh mother, the pain of my separation is so intense. Who do I articulate it to? Who do I talk to?" And then a couple of lines. ठीक है जी. सूला मार दी वानी कीती सूला मार दी वानी कीती बिरहो पाया साडे ख्याल पाया साडे ख्याल मायनी मैं कैनू आखां दर्द विछोड़े दा हाल मायनी मैं कैनू आखां दुखां दी रोटी सूलां दा सालण दुखां दी रोटी सूलां दा सालण आही दा बालण बाल आही दा बालण बाल मायनी मैं कैनू आखां दर्द विछोड़े दा हाल मायनी मैं कैनू आखां. So these were the lines that literally drew me into Shah Hussein's poetry. In the interest of time, I'll just talk about two lines. Dukhan di roti, soolan da salan, ahi da balan bal. A digression. Translating poetry from one language to another is an impossible task. And when it's spiritual poetry, it's 10 times an impossible task. So I've tried to convey a little bit of the essence of the original in my translations, but those of you who can ever engage with the original, I would urge you to, because it's just beautiful, it's luminous. So Dukha di roti, my translation is going to sound very, very prosaic. Dukha di roti, sulan da salan, ahi da balan bal. So my bread is made of my sorrows. My salan, my curry, is made of these spiky, hard thorns that have been piercing me. And the flame that I cook this on are my sighs which have been burning. This is the poetry of Shah Hussain. So I'm going to read a small excerpt from the book, and I'm going to sing a line from a very different kind of kafi, which is going to give you a fun insight into the character of Maqbool as well. I have it. I have it marked. I hope. Yes, I do. Oh gosh, I thought I had it. Okay. We were back at the maikhana that evening, and my master was holding court. This is in the voice of Maqbool. It was the first assembly after the drama of the attempted assassination. Not a spoiler, you'll read it when you read the book. And the room was absolutely packed. I was sitting to my master's right with the musicians among the murids. Madho sat prominently to his left, the side closer to his heart, I thought bitterly to myself. The assembly had been clamoring for a new kafi, and my master's mood was euphoric. His eyes were filled with tenderness as he turned to Madho, and it was apparent to everyone that his words were for him and him alone. So often did I call his name, my lover I became. To Ranja I answer now, he is no longer my name. The lover I sought everywhere, he has been found, to me he came. Says Hussain, O holy ones, rid me of my faults and blame. Such passion, such love. My master loved me too, of that I had no doubt. But he would never love me like this. Even as I was drenched in the beauty of his words, the red-hot dagger of jealousy turned in my breast. The kissa of Heer and Ranja, set to Sindhi Bhairavi, had been my gift to Lal Hussain when I first sang for him days after that night when I found him and was reborn. It had moved him so much that he had wept uncontrollably. I had sung the ballad for him over and over again, and we were one, battered but not broken, each other's refuge. Now, he was Madho's Heer. He was one with Madho. In my pain and anger, I wished that I had never sung the ballad for Lal Hussain. He turned now to me, my master, and said, something soft, Maqbool, something tender and subtle and soothing, like the cool breeze that blows from the Ravi on a summer evening, a melody that evokes the beauty of my Ranja. This he said, turning his gaze back to Madho. There was rebellion in my heart. I started a robust alap in Malkons. The melody that danced on my lips was neither subtle nor soothing. It pulsed with energy born of my defiant pain and rage. The drummers picked up the rhythm and started to pound on their instruments, and I sang like a creature possessed. My master frowned at me, but it was too late. The thumping, throbbing melody shook the room, and soon every man there was swaying. Several of them started to clap, accentuating the rhythm. My master, frowning no more, got to his feet and started to dance. Soon the entire assembly was dancing, whirling. I am sure nobody noticed the tears trickling down my cheeks as I sang. After some time, I forgot them too. So now I sing a line of that kafi. ਮਾਹੀ 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 ਕੂਕਦੀ ਮਾਹੀ 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 ਕੂਕਦੀ ਮੈਂ ਆਪੇ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਹੋਈ ਮੈਂ ਆਪੇ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਹੋਈ ਮੈਂ ਆਪੇ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਹੋਈ ਮੈਂ ਆਪੇ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਹੋਈ ਮਾਹੀ 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 ਕੂਕਦੀ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਕੋਈ ਆਖੋ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਰਾਂਝਣ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਕੋਈ ਆਖੋ ਹੀਰ ਨ ਆਖੋ ਹੀਰ ਨ ਆਖੋ ਹੀਰ ਨ ਆਖੋ ਕੋਈ ਹੀਰ ਨ ਆਖੋ ਹੀਰ ਨ ਆਖੋ ਹੀਰ ਨ ਆਖੋ ਕੋਈ ਮਾਹੀ 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 ਕੂਕਦੀ ਮਾਹੀ 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 ਕੂਕਦੀ Maqbool's rebellion.
If I'm not mistaken, this is the kafi that Bollywood has adapted the most in terms of
wasn't aware of
Hindi translations. Aaj se mujhko ranjha kehna hi na kehna koi. And a lot of other versions also of this particular thing, not just in, sometimes coming up in Hindi, sometimes coming up in Punjabi itself. Yeah. Right. All right. So I would open it up to the audience now, and then we will see what is it that we can do to here. Yes, the mic is coming to you.
Thank you.
It's on, yes.
Namaskar, thank you so much for, I haven't read the book. I hope I will soon. It sounds absolutely, I have read a little bit of Shah Hussein's poetry in scattered translations. I'm very interested. The topic of historic sourcing and history came up. And you frequently mentioned the lore sins. So I would be interested in knowing what are those, they sound so fascinating if they can capture the populace, the people, their thoughts, and if it is sung lore, or is it in women's songs, or is it in folk stories. So I would be interested in knowing what the lore is.
So the lore is all captured in the book. So, it appears in, various books because there's a little bit of history, and then there are the stories of the miracles and his interactions with people. And when he was dragged, there's some lore which says that chains were put around his ankles and they magically kept falling off. So there's no sort of definitive one source of lore, but any book that you pick up on Shah Hussain, there are multiple essays out there. All of them provide little snippets of different aspects of lore, and I've sort of selectively incorporated some of that into the book.
What I meant to ask was if there is any contemporaneous lore from in say other songs of other.
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
It is precisely these kinds of questions that remind me, that compel me to say that we need a critical edition of the book. There's so much of history around it that came up in the conversation, which otherwise would not, because, the book does not come with these kinds of snippets, right? So
Indeed.
About history, about the form of kafi, there's a lot to be, understood in terms of that. And the music, the context that you gave, I did not have that context when I was reading that passage about, the difference in the, ragas and the rebellion, the way in which it comes out. So we definitely, number one, need a podcast on the kafis. And second is we need a critical edition to...
There is actually one. I've been lazy or busy. So there are a couple of episodes out there. But there will be more, for sure. This is a matter of great interest for me. The music in particular.
Not a question, but a request. Can we have Sajjan De Hatba Sadi? Would you sing that?
Sure, absolutely. That is one of my favorite kafis as well. ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਿਉਂ ਕਰ ਆਖਾਂ ਛਾੜ ਵੇ ਅੜਿਆ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਪੋਸਤਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਪੋਸਤ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਪੋਸਤਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਪੋਸਤ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਅਮਲ ਪਿਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੱਡ ਵੇ ਅੜਿਆ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਿਉਂ ਕਰ ਆਖਾਂ ਛਾੜ ਵੇ ਅੜਿਆ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਸਜਣ ਦੇ ਗਲ ਬਾਹ ਸਾਡੀ I'll explain the lines very briefly. My arm is clasped around the neck of my beloved. Why would I ever let it go? And then the first verse, ਪੋਸਤੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਪੋਸਤ ਵਾਂਗ ਅਮਲ ਪਿਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੱਡ ਵੇੜਿਆ. I'm like a drug addict. I'm like an addict who has been drugged to the bones with my love. And on the coffee goes.
We thought we were here to discuss a book. We did not know that we are in for a treat like this as well. Yeah. Thank you so much. Anybody else who would?
We'd love to hear you more.
Yes. Not.
One or two more singing.
But only if we have time. I mean,
We have 10 minutes.
So I will sing a kaffi, which is one of my favorites, which didn't make it to the book. Don't ask me why. I have no answer. But this kaffi speaks to the malamati heart of Shah Hussain. It really is an elucidation of how Shah Hussain lives his life. I mean, my interpretation, of course. And I am no scholar of poetry. This is just, the interpretation of somebody who loves the poetry. That a lover of the poetry I am. I mean, that I will admit to. कि चंगी हाँ भी साहिब तेरी बंदी हाँ मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ गहला लोक जाने दीवानी गहला लोक जाने दीवानी मैं रंग साहिब दे रंगी हाँ मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ साजन मेरा अखी विच वसदा साजन मेरा अखी विच वसदा मैं गलिए फिरा निसंगी हाँ मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ मंदी हाँ मंदी हाँ मंदी हाँ कि चंगी हाँ. So I'll explain this briefly. This is one of my favorites. Mandi haan ke changi haan, bhi sahib teri bandi haan. Whether I'm low, whether I'm exalted, I'm yours. Whatever I am, I'm yours. Gehla lok jane devani. The ignorant people think I'm crazy. The ignorant people think I'm crazy. But I'm not crazy. Main rang sahib de rangi haan. I'm just imbued in the love of my beloved. And then the malamati heart of Shah Hussain. Sajan mera akhi vich vasada. My beloved lives in my eyes. I walk around carrying my beloved in my eyes. Main galiye fira nisangi haan. I walk the streets, and now we come up with the kind of word that defies translation. Now, you could paraphrase nisangi to say shameless, maybe, but it's not quite that. It's much more, it's richer, it's unconcerned, uncaring, not bashful. And look at the imagery here. He's using the feminine voice. We're talking about the 1500s, where certain restrictions were placed on women. A woman walking brazenly in the streets of Lahore would not be acceptable. But that's the imagery that Shah Hussain evokes. He's a woman who is walking through the streets of Lahore completely unconcerned about the world's gaze. That's the malamati heart of Shah Hussain. I mean, expressed with such beauty and such elegance with just a few words.
That added to the Sufiness of this evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to BIC for their, space and hospitality. And thank you to Mr. Sarbpreet Singh for the gift of this novel. I must also take you back to one of the earliest points that you made here, which is, I do not know, am I doing history, am I doing what? But thanks to my research on Buddha and his wife and the story and fiction around it, that one of the authors who has recently written about Buddha and his wife says, we don't know whether all this happened or not. Is this historical fiction or not? We don't know. But what I'm doing is hagiographical fiction. And I think we found a name for, these things, if we care for these names. So here we have, a growing community of hagiographical fiction and the readers of this fiction. Thank you to Mr. Chiranjiv Singh for pointing to the interesting excerpts in the book that we can take away as our own, points of entry into the novel. and hope we read the book to experience some intense moments of faith and love that this, evening tried to put across. I'm sure we can hang around a bit outside for book signing and things like that. So thank you all once again.
I'd just like to say a couple of words as well. So first of all, I want to thank the Bangalore International Center for hosting this. This is such a lovely venue, so beautifully organized, and an organization that starts its events on time. Here. I mean, that's amazing. I want to thank Sardar Chiranjiv Singh ji, who very kindly consented to be on the panel. And it was largely through his introduction and efforts that we are here today. I first engaged with him 4 years earlier when I was here for the Camel Merchant of Philadelphia. We spent a lot of time together. I got a lot of wisdom from you, some of which found its way into the Story of the Six, Volume 1. You may not have read it, but you're actually mentioned in that. So thank you for being so gracious and so welcoming. And Soni, I've got very fond of you over the past couple of years since we've been interacting. I didn't know Soni. This review of my book, The Story of the Six, appeared in the Asian Review of Books. And of all the reviewers who had responded to the book, I felt that this particular reviewer had completely nailed it. She understood why the book was written. She talked about what was important to me. So I had to find out who she was, and I immediately did some investigative work, and we've been in touch since then, and we've had many, many lovely conversations. She traveled all the way to Bangalore to be part of this panel. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.